Hey, fellow readers. Welcome back to my channel. Um, as you can see, the book that I'm going to talk about today is the new Hunger Games book by Suzanne Collins called The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And as you can see, it's pretty substantial size book. Um, and it does not involve Katniss Everdeen. Possible spoiler alerts for this review because I don't think it'll be too bad, but I just want to put it out there that there may be some spoilers in this review. So if you are sensitive to those types of things or don't like them, which I don't personally, maybe don't watch this review until after you read it. But yeah, I wanted to talk about this book because I just finished it last night, and it's new on the market, and I'm sure very popular given the stature of the Hunger Games books within the popular culture. I had high hopes for this book because I really enjoyed reading the Hunger Games books. At least the first two. I enjoyed the first two. The last one I felt was while I do think that the last one took on the necessary tone of war and revolution and death, and it got very heavy with its themes. And while I feel that that was necessary for where the story needed to go, it didn't quite excite me in the same way that the first two did, and especially the first one. But nevertheless, I'm a fan of the series. I thought that it was quite good, and it handled its dystopian themes quite well for a young adult book. Actually, it was right in there with thematically it was right in there with like Orwell's 1984 and Brave New World and the classics of sort of dystopian literature, and also political satire. So this is also a political satire, but it revolves around a young Cornelius Snow who Cornelius? No, is it Cornelius? Coriolanus. Excuse me. I kept, I think I'm gonna get those names confused at some point during this book, but Coriolanus Snow. I'll just call him Snow. But Snow, as you know, turns into, or he becomes he is the president of Panem in the Hunger Games trilogy. And here we have sort of an origin story of what he was like when he was younger, around the same age that Katniss Everdeen was in the trilogy, and so it looks at his role as a mentor in the Hunger Games. It's the first time he has any. We sense that it's the first time that he's really played a role in sort of like these state affairs, and he really takes to it. He becomes a mentor to a new character, not too dissimilar from Katniss Everdeen in terms of temperament and her sort of rebellious, badass nature. And that character's name is Lucy Gray Baird, I believe is how you pronounce it. And so she is chosen from District 12, again, like Katniss Everdeen, and Coriolanus Snow is assigned to her as a mentor in the games. And we get here sort of it's interesting to see kind of like how the games have evolved over time, because we know what they're like in the Hunger Games trilogy, which chronologically happens after this book. But what we get here is sort of like a primitive version of the Hunger Games as they're sort of evolving, and we don't have all of the recognizable aspects that we've come to know about them. So we're just developing the Hunger Games. They're just developing, for instance, the concept of sending the tributes who are inside the arena gifts, or I guess you could say gifts, the drones that come in and they give them food and water and other things. So that's a new concept. And Snow is instrumental in this book in sort of developing those ideas for how they can make the Hunger Games interesting, how they can make them not only interesting, but where people, really want to watch them, and they view them as like a spectator sport type of thing. And so they're trying to find ways basically to market them to the Pan Am, to specifically to the capital, but also to the districts too, but mostly the capital. They want people to watch them. And so they're looking for ideas, and Snow, who's young, he's writing essays. And we're also, in this process, we're introduced to another character who is not the president of Pan Am, but she is a doctor. Her name is Dr. Gaul, Gaul, which there might be a little pun there with her name, but she is sort of like I forgot her title, but she develops the I think they're called mutations, the animals or the weird creatures that are genetic hybrids that, there's the lizards that crawl around on the ground. They're real creepy. There's the jabberjay, I think it's called. So like there's all these creatures that are out there, and she's sort of developing them as like torture instruments to use in the games. And so she's sort of like a researcher slash scientist, but an evil one, developing evil technologies and biological agents that are meant to kill and torture the citizens in the districts. So yeah, she's not a good person. I would liken her to something like, she reminded me a lot of Dolores Umbridge in the Harry Potter books. Dolores Umbridge, remember, she was the professor who was brought in from the government of the Ministry of Magic, and she was like totally like bad and evil, and she was there to like really, as if you've read the books, you know that she was evil in a uniquely sweet and scary and disturbing kind of way. And this Dr. Gall has sort of the same sort of like spirit to her character. But Snow really takes to her and helps and there's this interesting thing about the book that Snow kind of like treads this like fine line between, he really is presented with choices throughout the whole book, and the choice is to be either good or bad, and we see him sort of tipping over onto this other side of the coin, where he's going into the bad side, where we recognize the self-absorption, the allegiance to the state, this sort of like blind allegiance to the state, and it really presents a sort of interesting look at how someone becomes politically misaligned, and how someone can become such a nationalist within this oppressive governmental system. And it's the inception, that idea of like, how do you presumably he starts off good, just like any of us. He's a person. He's not necessarily born evil. he is cultivated within this atmosphere to become evil. And it's interesting to see that evolution, because we're always, the readers know where he's going to end up. And so when we read about you know, what he's doing and how he's reacting to situations, we're keeping that in the back of our mind. We're not reading him just as the character on the page. We know where he's going to end up. So we always see, like, oh, okay, he's tipping over this way. I see where this is starting. I see, you know, he's really, like, he really is taking the side of the capital of the government, and we get why he's going to become the way he becomes, or what he becomes. And so that's really interesting. I do think that the novel, I feel like the novel fails in a fundamental way, because essentially, so I'm gonna say I found this book sort of like tedious to get through at a certain point. There was a certain point in the book, and you'll know it when you get there, I think, if you decide to read this book. There's a point where there's a major shift in not only the tone but the plot itself, and it just does a complete 180, and it grinds to a halt. The plot really grinds to a halt, and I felt like at a certain point, I just sort of got kind of like, okay, come on, let's get the ball rolling here. Let's wrap this up. And I think part of the problem is that to carry a book, a novel of this size, the subject matter and the character, the protagonist, has to be sympathetic on some level. Has to be, we have to care about the character in order to become fully emotionally invested in the story. But the problem is, how do you become invested in a character that you know is going to become someone akin to Adolf Hitler? You know, it's hard. It's a very difficult thing to do. And I guess on some level this book could have worked as like a dark character study of just a political tyrant and a dictator. But I don't know if it did that. I don't know if it fully succeeded in making me become emotionally invested in the character. Having said that, it's really, for the most part, it's a thrill to read. You know, we do enter the arena again with Lucy Graybeard, and we do get to see, you know, all the things that we sort of enjoy about the Hunger Games, and the thrill and the action of it. It's all there. The political intrigue, it's there too. So I thought it was a really interesting choice of subject matter for the next Hunger Games book. Coriolanus Snow, the origin story, what he was like as a teen, and yeah. And one last thing I want to say about this book is, I'm sure that you can draw many parallels to our current political climate, and what that entails as far as questioning authority and governmental authority, and what it means to be to pledge your allegiance to the state, the to the nation. Here the characters are always reciting an anthem, the national anthem. Coriolanus Snow's grandmother, she wakes up every morning and she recites the national anthem, and it's a theme that's carried throughout, where he has to decide, again, good or bad, whether he's going to side on the side of the state, which is really, you know, all he has known growing up. Especially with his grandmother's influence. She's very, she's kind of old school in the way that she, you know, sees the state as, she's kind of like a modern day, or a contemporary, like, I don't know what you would call them. I don't want to offend anyone, but it it reminded me of like an old school, like conservative, American person, like just an older, Republican like person that's just, resistant to, sort of progressive, political ideas and things like that. And so she's very instrumental in, shaping Coriolanus's, political views. And so I feel like all of that has relevance today in today's political climate, questioning government, questioning authority, why are things the way that they are, and that choice that you have to make, that choice of whether you're going to pledge allegiance to a system that is, faulty and flawed, and ignore the sufferings of others, or whether you're going to, question and rebel and not accept, oppression and tyranny and, things like that. And so I felt like those were highly relevant themes. And, for what it's worth, I did enjoy most of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but, overall I felt, it missed the mark in a pretty fundamental way. But so I'm conflicted on this book, but I don't regret reading it. I don't regret buying it. I would recommend it, of course, to, not that y'all need my recommendation, but any Hunger Games fan, I think, will be very interested to read this book. So, yeah, that's my review. I would love to know what you thought about this book. In the comments below, please feel free to, share. And yes, happy reading. My next video is going to be, probably a book haul video, because I have bought quite a few books since my last book haul video. Of course I have. It's terrible. I keep spending like crazy, but, I can't help it. That's my thing. So anyway, happy reading and see you next time.